Hi, Eric. I'm really, really excited that you're here to talk to me today because you know what? I want to do personalization. We're so excited about it. We've been talking about it, and that's the number one thing we want to do this year.
Well, what do you mean by personalization? What are you actually aiming at? Because everybody means slightly different things with personalization.
Personalized experiences, show me the things I'm interested in proactively, really help me find what I want to find as a buyer, right? If I leave and come back to the site as a buyer, I want to pick up where I went left off, right? I don't want to start over.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, when we step back and think about it, really at this point, that's all search, right? Everything you've just mentioned. So being able to see the content that's applicable to me, right? Being able to show me things I might be interested in proactively, being able to pick up where I left off. There's search engines that are driving that across the board.
Really? That's all search?
If you take a step back, I mean, what is the most personalized website in the world right now? Take a step back, think of every website you use, commerce or not. What's the most personalized place that you go?
Well, I guess if I really want to think about it, I start pretty much start everything I'm going to do with Google.
Exactly. And so Google, if you look at the personalization level on Google, which is search, a search engine underneath the scenes, obviously, um, everything everything is directly attributed or targeted towards you as an individual. You do a search, you get back results specific for you. And it could be specific for you in that, hey, they know you were in that store yesterday, or they know you're going to, or that you frequently go to this place physically, right? Or this location. It could be that they know that you've had an email about it, right? They have all of the signals about you as an individual and use that to essentially personalize and drive the content on that site around you as an individual. When we talk about e-commerce, we're really, in many cases with search, trying to do the exact same thing because if we make it about you as the individual are more likely to buy more, at least is the hypothesis, right? It's proven out many different places, but we try to prove that out with each customer
Well,
individually.
that's really interesting, Eric. I
Does that make
never
sense?
thought of it that way. I really never thought about search being personalization. So I guess it might be good to start with so what defines search, right? Like, what does it really mean?
Well, so let's take a step back because search is used in many different ways, right? Um, Sometimes when folks talk about search, particularly with e-commerce, right, they're talking about paid search or search engine optimization, right? The search that is how do I make Google show me or my results higher or better or more frequently for my customers, right? Typically, it's how do I increase the width of my funnel and bring more people to my site or experience, right? Um, while that's very much search, that's not specifically what we're talking about today with kind of site search, right? The second part of search really is going to be okay, now when somebody's on my website, once I've actually attracted someone to my website, how do I get them the information, the content, the products, the experience that they're interested in, right? And so in the background, search is we're making an index of all of the different content or products that someone can see, right? We're essentially think of the old library. It's the card catalog of where is all the stuff we might want to look at, right? Just the bare metal here, right? This has been done for ages. This has been done if you remember back to the Excite or the Alta Vista days, right? You could do this, right? You can make what's out there on the internet and find it, right? The next part of search is okay, now how do we determine what is relevant for a user if there are multiple possible options that could be relevant, right? So, this isn't like a database where I'm just trying to sort for what's the largest to the smallest or, A to B or A to Z or something like that, right? I instead am trying to take all of the signals that we know about you as a customer, right, or as a user of an experience and provide you a more optimal outcome. Right. So in this case, it's I know that our personalization engine in terms of like our maybe our CDP, our customer data platform says, oh, this is a high value buyer. This is someone who is interested in watches, right? And thus I can give those signals into the search engine and say, high value buyer, show more expensive things, interested in watches, tend towards watches, right? But it's also what are the past interactions you've had on our site? What have you clicked on? What have you searched for? What have you purchased? right? And then with machine learning, can I compare that to every other user who's ever been on our experience, right? And say, oh, well, if user A clicked on this product and bought it, but user B clicked on this, went to a different one, then came back and bought C, well, then we've got options. Maybe we show products A or C, right? We can learn from that past behavior on the fly so that it's not one size fits all, right? And even beyond that, we can learn in a way that we determine similarity of users and similarity of products, right? So I can determine, Karie, that you purchase things very much like me, but very differently than John
Right.
Smith or than Bob, right? So my behavior on the site will adjust relevancy, whereas John Smith or Bob's will not, right? Furthermore, I can learn that these products, if we think of them as it's called vector-based search, right? If we think of all the attributes of a product, we can determine how similar they are to one another, right? So this it lets us group products of the similar types or accessories of products with a product and that sort of thing, right? Mixing that with that user interaction data, I can now do such things as Karie goes in and searches for golf clubs, right? She changes her search to gloves and only finds golf gloves because, hey, we know that this user is searching in the golf realm of products, right? Let's show gloves as part of the golf realm of products, right? If you then change your search to winter coats, right, we know, oh, wait, never mind, we're not talking about golf anymore. Let us jump over into that winter realm of products, right? And if you go and search for the exact same term for gloves, well, now we can show you winter gloves, right? Because, oh, this is what Karie is actually looking for in the context of what Karie has been doing. So, long answer to a relatively short question, but it's the idea of basically taking all of the information we know about your product catalog and your users, combining them together, and giving the users the best results
And that's
possible.
great, Eric. So like you talked a lot about you gave a lot of B to C type consumer type answers to that last question. What happens in that B2B
Mm-hmm.
scenario, right? And where we're talking about the fact that somebody may start researching without logging in, even if they have an account, right? And then when they log in, because
Yep.
they have an account, we probably know exactly who they are. So tell me about search in that B2B
Mm-hmm.
scenario a little bit more.
Good question. So in the B2B scenario, it actually can even be more powerful because you have a lot more data on users, right? When you think about it as a B2C site, right? Users come to the site and you've got to make a
Right.
decision real quickly off of maybe like 5 clicks, right? Who are you? What do you
It's kind
want?
of like
I'm
name
going to do
that
my
tune.
best, right? On a B2B scenario, exactly. It's guess from limited information where we're going at the end of the day, right? B2B scenario, you've got your purchasers, your buyers who are coming in continuously, right? You've got your buyers who are constantly coming back to your site and you're learning their behavior automatically, and when you have that much data, that's where machine learning thrives, right? Machine learning can pick up all that information and just run with it, and so it can start to understand, okay, this is a user who's doing research. They're not looking at the product page, the PDP, very long. They're actually going and looking at the manual, the specifications, the other content related to this product more often. So let me start biasing and boosting that higher for that individual user so that when they find it, maybe we have the UI that links and says what product's a part of, but highlights in big old, block letters at the top, here's the product manual you're probably looking for, right? For a purchaser, we might know the different. We might think differently, right? They're often
Right.
going and buying and executing via this, right? So on their end, they can have the buy capabilities, the buy options, all of the product information up front. They can have things like personalized pricing for them, right? That a intelligent search index at this point can have thousands of prices for a single product and show the appropriate price so that that user can execute that transaction quickly, right? At the end of the day, the motivations are in some ways the same, right? On a B2C site, the motivation is how do I get someone to buy as much as possible as quick as possible? Because if I go slowly on anything, that user's going to get bored
Right.
and go to my competitor, right? On a B2B site, that can be the same scenario, but it's also how do I help a customer buy as much as possible, as quickly as possible? Because when they find it delightful to buy from us, if they have multiple options, they'll probably come back and buy
Right.
from us as well, like on that other product instead, right? So how do we just increase that or decrease the friction for customers in interacting with our organization
So, Eric,
at the end of
I
the day?
agree. Search is, I mean, most people today who come to a site, B2B, B2C, doesn't matter. They're not using navigation anymore, right? They're really looking at search and they're
Yeah.
searching for what they want. And when we talk about, content and commerce, we're talking about bringing a CMS and a commerce solution together, right? We're
Hmm.
talking about where our brands used to be separate from
Hmm.
our commerce sites for whatever reason. And now we're talking about content and commerce and bringing them together. And I know that from a platform standpoint, um, there's a lot of challenges when you have two platforms and they both have integrated search, right? So
Hmm.
the challenges are often
Hmm.
switching context, right? Are you going to do you want to search content in your example of manuals or safety sheets or
Yep.
whatever that might be, right? Or I need help installing this or
Hmm. Even past
exactly.
invoices or
As
orders.
opposed to I want to do a product
Yep.
search, right? So when we bring content and
Yep.
commerce together, one of the challenges is search is a very complicated process because we can't always integrate both across both of those because this depending on how you integrate your content and commerce, right? There's lots of models we've talked about in past scenarios.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about like ways to overcome that when you're thinking about this whole concept of search and content and commerce?
Yeah, absolutely. And so everybody's used the site. I mean, I've been on Fortune 10, Fortune 100 sites all over the place, right? Where they've always used the experience where you see a search box and then there's a little radio button for do you want
Right.
products or do you want content, right? Find me someone who's ever liked that experience.
No
I'll
one.
wait. They just don't exist, right? At this point, we're all completely spoiled
Right.
by Google, right? Google is the company that has ruined search for most other companies because they make it look easy, and it's not easy. They've spent tens of billions of dollars and millions of man hours into kind of developing that system, but we have expectations as consumers or employees, right, in terms of using experiences these days. Historically, the reason why you've had that product versus content kind of approach, right, is everybody interacted with what we called federated search. Right. So the idea with federated search is I go to that search box and then I hit enter. And if I don't have that product and content, when I hit enter, I send one search request off to my product system, another off to my content system, and then I get both the results back and I try to merge them together somehow. Right. That process of merging them together is the hard part, right? Just getting the information is easy, but if I have system A that says this result is the most important, and system B that says no, 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 this one is the most important, which is right? Right? That's the challenge that made Google a what $2 trillion company, whatever they're worth now, right? How do you determine that relevance? So what's changed is the model has moved for most of the high-end experiences from a federated search system to a unified search system, right? Have a single search system, a single index that it can index both the content side of the house as well as the product side of the house into a single kind of database, as it were. Right? When you do that, what you can do is you can apply your signals uniformly across everything, product or content, and give integrated results across the board. Right? I can determine is that spec sheet more important than the product display page more important than the invoice that
Right.
you had previously. Right? I can develop business logic, machine learning logic, just general keyword logic. Right? All of these pieces can now be done cohesively and consistently across the board. And so it really has been a bit of a shift in terms of how companies look at search. Right? It's not best of breed for all of
Right.
these different scenarios. It's we need one kind of global solution that can look at all these areas because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you have best of breed search in commerce if you don't have it on your content side, because they're both going to argue, and all of the benefits from both of them are lost if you try to mix them
That
together
makes a lot of
anyway.
sense. So, Eric, I, this is a pet peeve of mine, right? I know when I kicked off talking about how excited I was about
Hmm.
personalization, um, because I am excited about personalization because, it's so important to so many of our clients. It comes up all the time, and we constantly are challenging, like, what's your definition of personalization? Because it's, as you stated, it's different for
Right.
everyone. But I really want to
Hmm.
kind of I really want to focus on the concept of that search foundation for a minute, right? Because we talk
Hmm.
about elevating search, but we have so many clients that even struggle with search within like within their existing technologies, right? Like and the reason for
Hmm.
that is so much about they lack content, like they don't have a search strategy. They really don't define what
Hmm.
search is for their organization. They don't really understand how people search,
Hmm.
right? And they they maybe they don't have a PIM where all their product information data is going to into a system and being enriched in a single location, right? And I'm it it's not about the
Hmm.
technology, it's about the fact that you're bringing the data together because data is what we're pulling in from all of these systems that exist within our organization. But the
Yep.
reality is that as we move towards um, anything that's external, regardless if it's supporting your channel, it's supporting the consumer, it's supporting a customer, a direct to customer model, whatever your model is, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
Um, Enrichment of content and building content, even starting with product content, right, is so important. And
Hmm.
we see organizations immaturely like want to move like from 0 to 15,000 steps forward, and they lack that foundation. Can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit? I'm just interested in your perspective on that foundation
Yep.
piece.
Yeah, and so a few different thoughts to this, right? So piece one is, I think for many years there's been two mindsets towards search, right? There have been those that, in my mind, get it and those that don't, right? And so for many years, search for many organizations has been treated as a check the
Hmm.
box sort of operation, right? We stood up a new website. Do we have search? Yep. Check that box and move on, right? It doesn't work very well, right? But it doesn't work well, so we didn't invest in it. So, yeah, no problem, right? Part of the reason I got into the search in the first place is because I struggle with that dichotomy that the second, third largest company in the world is that large because
Hmm.
of how good they are at search, right? The Amazons of the world, I will posit, are crushing the competition largely because of how good they are at search and this, ability to give relevant information to relevant people, right? But a huge rest of the world doesn't seem to consider it interesting or useful, right? They consider it as, yeah, it's a feature we need, but like it's not a key part of it, right? It's more the layout and other pieces, right? Now, to the other part of it, to your question, right, is the content side of it. All right, we get lots of customers who come in and say we're going to buy a better search engine and it's magically going to make everything work better on its own. And my question is, okay, how clean is your data? Right? How good is your data? Because the long and short that most search vendors will not tell you likely is the old adage garbage in, garbage out applies
Right.
everywhere, right? A good search engine isn't magic, right? It can help, but it's not magic. Um, Even the machine learning parts of it, where we're really getting into like the advanced AI parts, where we're learning from user behavior and all this sort of stuff, it learns from past user interactions. If your content is so bad that no one can find it, there's no successful user interactions to learn from in the first
Right.
place, right? I can't learn the pattern of user search for X, they clicked on this product, so show it to other people who search for X if they can never find the
Right.
product when they do a search in the first place, right? There's got to be some linkage there. So a lot of times what we end up doing is having a multi-phased conversation, right, about not only the technology with search, but a huge part is also about the business and the content, right? The data needs to be there, bar none. There has to be taxonomy to it. There has to be information to it. If you want to make something filterable or sortable, we can't do that on the fly. We have to do that off of information about your products that is consistent and cohesive, right? I can't look at size and have L next to large, next to LAR, next to LG, right? Or my customer is going to come to the site and say, I want a large gloves or large shirt or large shoes or what have you, right? Which of these four do I click? Right? There's nothing more frustrated than that, and that's all coming out of the underlying data. It has to be normalized and cohesive accordingly, right? Um, we can't essentially just bring in the technology and think of the technology alone. We also have to think about the business process around how do we use that technology, right? So one of the things that all modern search engines really have built in pretty heavily now are analytics, right? Because that feedback loop where it's learning from user behavior, you have to have the analytics to learn from, right? And so one of the very key things that we instill in our customers real early on is we need to make sure that you're looking at these analytics and what they're telling you about your content in order to drive the essentially improvement and the creation and the reflection on your content going forward, right? Are people searching for something that you know you have, but they're getting zero results, right? They can't find it. What needs to change? Does the content need to be redone? Does a synonym need to be put in? Does the content need to be redone to incorporate that
Right.
synonym, right? That somebody uses that word as well, right? Um, Slightly less commerce, but a real life story from a customer I won't name. Um, Very, very, very large health insurance company, right? 30 million members. They sent out an email from their marketing arm saying, go paperless, right? Paperless billing, we can all infer as humans, right? The problem was nothing on their website or anywhere in their organization had the terms go paperless in it. Not a single piece of content across all of their content did. They luckily had someone whose job was to pay attention to search analytics, pay attention to this, who realized pretty quickly that in the last hour they'd had
Wow.
20,000 requests for go paperless that were had no responses, right? And so they were able to go in and create a landing page the next day, but in the short term put a synonym in that go paperless equals electronic billings, right? And all of a sudden everybody could actually find that content, right? At a large, 50,000 person organization, those
Right.
sorts of disconnects happen, right? But it ultimately falls back to the content has to be there to support all the other business activities, and there has to be care and thought in that, or you get things where one hand doesn't talk to the other, and now we're having a completely broken user experience accordingly. Right there, we're out of the realm of personalization. We're just in the realm of does it
Right.
flat out just work? If I, click on the link or search for what I was
We see
sent
that
and
a
I
lot,
can't find
right?
it, right?
Companies that are like get very excited about the bright shiny object, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
search and machine learning is just so cool, and it is, right? Totally is. And there's a total
Mm-hmm.
place for it. But I really like to encourage people to be like, focus on getting the best results you can with what you have, right? If you have 50 products in
Mm-hmm.
a category and you search and you get 10, fix those 50, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be you don't move to
Mm-hmm.
a integrated search solution along the way, right? But you need to at least
Mm-hmm.
start spending some time in making that a priority and aligning it, right?
Yep.
I don't think there's a wrong time, but if you're not going to prioritize content, that to me that there is a wrong time, right? If you're not going to prioritize it at all,
Mm-hmm.
investing in search is not, a search tool is not going to solve your problem, right? And I know you and I've had a lot of conversations around that.
It's 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 the old adage of building a house on
Yep,
top of a shaky foundation, right? We can put it there, but you're not going to be able to actually use it to its full capabilities if you haven't, got your house in order
I
first,
agree.
right? And from my point, what I would say is, granted, I'm slanted on this. I do search for a living, right? Um, I genuinely think that customers, particularly in the commerce space, B2B, B2C, fundamentally they need to start using machine learning
Agreed.
search solutions because, to be quite honest, they drive significantly higher revenues, profits, lifetime customer value, everything else than the alternative, right? But to your point, Karie, just jumping to that, we're gonna use machine learning, right? But it has no idea what it's learning from. There's nothing we can really find in the first place
Right.
isn't a solution, right? There's real work that has to be done in making sure the content is ready and correct, right? And search can provide that feedback loop to drive better content curation and creation down the line as you get analytics on what are people looking for, where are they struggling, and so on, right? But there has to be a
Agreed.
base level we're starting from. So whether it's content purely first or we're talking about content and search at the same side and honestly making an effort on both, there needs to be an effort on the content side if search is coming into the mix. And I would argue that fundamentally for most commerce related businesses, search has to come into the mix within the next, say, 3 to 5 years, or you're
Right.
going to lose
And
out
I think for companies that are moving
significantly.
towards content and
Um,
commerce, right, there's a real benefit in that scenario simply because we've got two tools and we've got, as you mentioned, like the radio buttons or a drop down, whatever that is, it defaults to product and then you have to select content.
mhm.
In that scenario alone, there's a
Yep.
huge argument for prioritizing search and machine learning because you're going to need that to make that really
Yep.
impressive. And if you're going to invest in a best-in-class CMS or experience DXP experience platform
Hmm.
and a best-in-class commerce platform and bring them together, right? Then there's a huge case for saying that search should be part of that strategy. And I think you and I both completely
Yep.
agree on that. Um, and I think timing
Hmm.
wise is if most organizations that are really considering content and commerce and bringing those together have some level of maturity within their organization because it takes that next level of maturity. A
Right.
company just starting out generally does not have the skills, the resources, the, even the
Yep.
wherewithal to manage the complexity of those blended experiences. Um, and this has been awesome, Eric.
Yep.
I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of search because we're seeing search change so much over the last several years.
Hmm.
And I think it would be really
Yep.
helpful for people to understand like how is search evolving, right? Because like you said, search for a lot of companies, search was a check the box. Yep, we've got this really big search box and it looks really good.
We've got the bar.
Even
There
if
you
nothing
go.
comes up, it
Yep.
looks beautiful, right? So talk to me a little bit about
Yep.
like how search is evolving.
So let's talk about the history of kind of site search, as we're calling it, or commerce search, right? Early on, and even still today, if we're talking like the Solar or
Right.
Elasticsearch kind of implementations, right? We're using essentially what is keyword search, right? It's generally the idea that I'm going to type in my keywords. The search engine is going to take those keywords and it's going to say for each product we're looking for, right? How many times does that keyword show up in the description, the title, any other metadata we give, right? What percentage of the total words in that information does it make up? And if you search for two words together, how close are they? Right? If they're, I've got one word in the title, another one at the end of the description, that's probably not a good signal. But if they're right next to each other, okay, that's the phrase or the concept we're working with, right? And so that's been the traditional search, right? If you think back to the Alta Vista, Excite, early Yahoo days,
Right.
this is what was done, right? This is how those search engines worked, right? It works. I just would argue it doesn't work particularly well, right? We've all been on those search experiences where you look for something and you kind of scratch your head and go, why would this come up, right? And I call this in a lot of cases the red sweater problem, right? You search for a red sweater on a website and you get back nothing, or you get back, only things that say red in the title or sweater in the title, but you don't get back red
Right.
sweaters, right? Because really what you're looking for is category is sweaters, color is red, right? As a human, we can interpret that, but if I'm just looking at keywords, I don't get that, and as such, I get back a list of just gibberish a lot of times, right? Um, More recently, there's been the biggest change in search recently, and what's really fundamentally changed is, to be honest, machine learning, right? And cloud computing is a big driver behind this, right? The fact that these platforms can run on essentially elastic cloud services so that they can spin up machine learning jobs at will at whatever scale they need over the scale of data they need has a huge impact here, right? So when we do this, what we're essentially doing is we're applying things in a few ways. First, we're applying capabilities in that we have natural language and query understanding to say that red sweater, we can map that to the attributes and the schema and the data within our catalog, right? So red, oh, that's one of our colors. Let's change the query to say color is red, right? Oh, sweater. Oh, that's like sweaters, which is one of our category. Let's change that to say category is sweaters, and now we get back all of those red sweaters appropriate, right? That's just real simple, natural query understanding at the search box level, right? The other real evolution here is that it's feedback loop based machine learning in terms of how do we see what customers are doing, make results for other customers based on successful outcomes for earlier customers in the past, right? How do I start creating that loop to tweak what's happening for everybody based on past experiences, right? And for that, I would argue this is likely the bigger adjustment or improvement in search historically, right? The Before we got into this feedback loop stuff, the one area that was tried was a lot of people were trying to understand content better, right? And you can think of this a little bit to the IBM Watson days, right? Where you had IBM Watson was going to solve cancer because it understood all the documents, it could read them and truly get that, right? And really, what was found was that that's really hard to do, right? You can get a better, segment of information for content based on understanding it, but you probably can't
Right.
get every interpretation or every meaning. And any meaning that you get probably is going to at some point be driven by human understanding. Whereas if we go the feedback loop approach, we get beyond human understanding, right? You can't have one human that looks at billions of transactions
Right.
and figures out hidden patterns, right? Machine learning can do that, right? So now the next level, where we're kind of going with this, right, and where some of the platforms are really getting to, and particularly where the pinnacles of industry is getting to, is what are we optimizing by with this machine learning, right? Actually being able to select what as a business are we going for, right? So the lowest level that typically you aim for here is conversions, right? I want to optimize and generate more conversions on my website, right? And that's useful. You're going to, sell more product, make more money. All of these are good things, right? But the challenge is the reason this is the lowest level is because at the end of the day, that's a relatively easy number to manipulate, right? I can put a paid search out on Google for 95% off my product, and conversions are going to go through the roof, right? It's a nice number. It's something that definitely should be focused on, but it's a relatively easy number at the end of the day, right? The next area that people start focusing on, and where the next level up, is focusing on revenue, right? How do I optimize or maximize the amount of revenue that my site will earn as a whole based on watching all of the interactions from my customers, right? It could be research customers, and I'm following maybe the EDI or the other forms of purchasing, the point of sale or other areas down the stream, right? Or it could be active purchasing on my website, my B2B2C, B2B, B2B2C kind of experience internally, right? And so in this case, all I'm looking at is what is the price of objects being sold, how many customers are buying them. I'm maximizing or optimizing for how do I push that number as high as possible, right? The challenge with that one is it's good. It's, to be honest, the state of the art for many companies where they're really pushing now. But the problem is it doesn't take into account everything like, okay, how many of these items that we're selling are being returned because we sold the more expensive one and somebody decided to return it, right? Are we ultimately reducing profit because we're selling the more expensive item? Maybe our margin is lower on this or what have you, right? The third level that customers really go to, and this is the peak for most customers right now, is profit. How do I optimize towards profit from a search platform? All right. So how do I take that entire end result of a set of customer interactions? So it could be we're taking
Right.
returns, taking defects, taking RMAs, taking profit margin, all of those pieces to account, right? But how do I have that number available to the search index so that search can optimize and the machine learning algorithm of search can optimize on maximizing that number as much as possible? Right? How do we bump that profit number up? Because at the end of the day, though this might decrease revenue slightly, right? If profits are higher, generally, if I'm running a company, I'm
Right.
higher or I'm happier as an organization, as an executive, and so on, right? That's kind of the state of the art for most. Now, there are, I'd say, three or four companies in the world right now that are a step beyond that, right? And so those three or four companies generally are going to be more B2C companies, right? And this is probably the Amazons, the Walmarts, the Home Depots, right, of the world, the real big boys that are out there, right, are have the
Right.
resource and energy to put into this. And to be honest, the search platforms you can purchase are moving towards this, but aren't here yet. And that's how do I optimize for
Right.
lifetime value per customer, right? That lifetime value is likely the best metric to aim for, right? Holistically, because you're not just trying to make money today, you're trying to
Right.
make money longer term as well and keep growing that customer base. But it's also the hardest to get to because there are significantly more data points that need to be pulled in and leveraged. And there's also reasonably significant management viewpoint changes that need to be made to say, yeah, I'm willing to take less profit this quarter in order to
Right.
have more profit next quarter, right? Wall Street's really a short-term sort of area, right? They want results now, and yeah, saying you'll have results next quarter is
Right.
nice, but I want them now, right? You've got to be willing to make that commitment. But as an example here, not everybody, but most people use Amazon, right? As an example of them doing this in action that you can see, many times if you go to Amazon, say you search for baby clothes, right? You'll see one result in your search results that seems completely off base, right? So I'll search for baby clothes and I'll see, oh, there's a result for baby diapers here, right? To me as an individual in real time, I think, oh man, their search engine screwed up. Like I'll just ignore that one and keep going on. But they did that very much on purpose, right? They know that they will get a minuscule conversion on showing baby diapers when somebody's searching for baby clothes. But what they also know is that if you click on that result, well, heck, you've just opened up a whole new category for
Right.
them to market to you on, for that you're interested in, right? You've given them that signal that, hey, there's more lifetime
Right.
value to be earned here, right? And so Amazon does millions, if not billions, of micro experiments on every single search per day, just feeling out, this might not be the best result, but where else could this person be interested? What else could I push to them? What else could I target to them, right? That is super duper powerful at the end of the day, right? That's the fourth level where search is going, right? There is no platform on the market as of yet that
Right.
is at that fourth level, right? For that, you were using one of the third level platforms and
Right.
building pieces on top of it. You're having your data scientists, machine learning groups working on it. But ultimately, when we look at the statistics of Amazon was what 38% of e-commerce before the pandemic, after they're like 56%, and e-commerce has grown by
Yes.
leaps and bounds since then. It works, right? It can show you that they're doing something right, and the search alone isn't what's
Right.
driving that, but it's a big chunk, I'd argue, right? Um, that's where the market is, or the evolution is going, and ultimately that's what everyone else is going to be competing with, right? That's what you need to kind of get to if you're looking at search, you're looking at experience and saying, how do I do it as well as the biggest players in the space or the biggest companies in the world? That's what they're focusing on, and there's research out there, from Google and others that you can increase profits by 30 to 50% doing this, right? There are real numbers that come out of doing this sort of work. It's all a percentage of what you have now, right? It's not going to grow you from $1 million business to $1 billion business overnight, right? But it can drastically drive improvements. And we've seen that with a lot of our implementations where, 7 figures of investment gets
Right.
9 figures of return in the first year, right? There's dramatic improvements that can be made via using these sorts of technologies.
That makes a lot of sense. Um, I think this is great because I really like how, search really ties into the whole concept of content and commerce, which is what this is about, right? But in
Mm-hmm.
addition to that, it really gives people a deeper understanding of the role of search and the importance of search, right? People are spending,
Mm-hmm.
businesses are spending a lot of money on marketing to drive awareness, to get people to identify you as a company when they have a need, right? Because a lot of times marketing, there isn't a direct result from a marketing activity to somebody coming to your site because there may be a moment of need, right? And we
Mm-hmm.
see that a lot in B2B especially, but in B2C as well, right?
Yep.
I might be looking at refrigerators just because I like looking at refrigerators, but when I really am interested in
It's
buying
a
a
hobby.
refrigerator, my devotion to figuring that out changes, right? But it's amazing to me how many
Mm-hmm.
times companies really miss the opportunity that once you get them there, you need to engage them and um, you need to drive them to spend more time to look at more information, whether it's product or content or whatever, right? um, and that's such an
Mm-hmm.
important piece, and I think it's so often, to your point, just a checkbox. So I think that it's great that we were able to have this
Mm-hmm.
conversation. I learned a lot, which is always great for me as well. And I really think that this is information that companies can really think about and leverage. So I really appreciate you spending time with me today and talking about search in the concept of content and commerce.
My pleasure. I appreciate you having me on.